Nothing can stop Talking Tuesday, not even an off week, not even one that's just 2 weeks into the season. Come on, schedule makers. Let's play a game. Anyway, it's the podcast daily. It is Talking Tuesday. It's Bill Landis, Jeremy Birmingham, and me, Austin Ward. We will be back in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center for Improvement Week to talk to Ryan Day and Jim Knowles. We have questions for them about the Buckeyes and what all they're looking to improve on after these first 2 weeks, which, based on Saturday night, Bill, I don't know where they would even begin.
Yeah, I don't know what to ask. What do you ask after a game like that? I'm not entirely sure. I'm sure they have their checklist of things they'd like to improve upon. Scoring a touchdown every time you have the ball seems like a high bar to clear, but I guess they could harp in on that if they wanted to, because they technically did not do that on Saturday, even though they came pretty darn close to doing so.
I want to know, and I'll just start, I guess, where Improvement Week came from, where the idea for this came from. Because,
well, Berm, when a daddy improvement week and a mommy improvement week like each other very much.
Oh, okay. That makes so much sense when you put it that way. No, but we've obviously experienced off weeks before in the regular season, and Ohio State has never taken this tack. So I'm curious if it's a matter of this just being the first of two, if it's maybe different because they're looking ahead to the stretch of Michigan State, Iowa, and Oregon as a real barometer for where they are. Like, I'm just fascinated by the concept, actually, of going this week and saying, okay, we're going to get right back to work on Sunday like they did, and work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but then still, have Friday and Saturday be like a game week. It's a little different. And for a team that has extremely high expectations, I think it's a good thing, because I don't believe that they are perfect, and I don't think that they believe that either. So I want to know whose idea it was, really. What was the genesis of it? What book did Ryan Day read that he was like, hey, I can take that? Or is this a Jim Tressel thing?
I would think that this is a Ryan Day idea, but he probably had it and hatched it a long time ago, because I bet if you asked the coaching staff, they don't love that this fell on week 3 of the season. There's nothing you can do about it. Since they revamped it, since the Big Ten expansion, and the schedule was redone a number of times, I don't know that they would have said, you know what, really want to have a break after the first 2 non-conference games and reset and recharge. I think it's a bad place. We always get into these conversations. Usually it's when Ohio State has one off week. It's like, hey, did this come at a good time? Do they need to get healthy? Is this a bad time? Could they have kept the momentum going? I think this one, Bill, is just straight up a bad time. I don't think it falls on a generous spot in the schedule.
I probably agree with that. I guess in that way, it will be a good test of Ohio State's focus, right? They were pretty locked in, obviously, against Western Michigan. It seemed like Ryan Day was really pushing that button, and the team responded the way you want them to. But now you kind of have to maintain that and then come out on the other side of it against a Marshall team where you're, like, again, going to have to sort of bring your own juice to that kind of game. It's going to be a noon game against a non-conference opponent. I don't think the place will be jumping all that much. So, like, I think it will be instructive about this team and just sort of its makeup. But yeah, I ideally you'd be playing a game and continuing to ramp up toward Michigan State and Iowa, and then obviously Oregon after that. It'd be one thing if they had sort of like a rash of injuries after these first 2 games, some time to recover from that, but they really don't, outside of Donovan Jackson and Cody Simon, who Cody seemed fine on Saturday. So I actually was surprised how much he played on Saturday. So I typically am like, who cares when the off week is? Doesn't really matter. But this does feel a little odd. And I think there are at least 5 teams in the North that I know of that are off this week. But yeah, when you play like Ohio State just played, you'd like an opportunity to immediately build upon that. They don't have it, so they got to figure out a way to maintain this momentum that they seemed to start to develop last week without having a Saturday opponent that kind of take it out on.
I wonder what that means for just the way that Ryan Day wants to structure these practices on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. He said that I thought maybe there was a world where the Buckeyes would add one on Friday or Saturday or both, and like treat this as a continuation in some ways of training camp. And doesn't seem like he wants to do that. And I can certainly understand why you don't do that as well. You don't want to those practices against Ohio State ones-on-ones are very physical. They're more demanding and taxing than I think in some ways the games are. So you don't want to add a bunch of those after the season has already started. But to your point as well, Bill, you also want to stay sharp because now the season has begun and Ohio State made the jumps that those coaches always talk about. Your biggest improvement comes from week 1 to week 2. And I think we saw that in virtually every phase of the game against Western Michigan. And then what? You stop? Like you're supposed to, you want to sustain that if you're a coach. Like you don't think, well, we jump from week 1 to week 2 is going to be awesome. And then you just get to keep rolling and keep building. Nope, sorry. Hit the pause button and take an off week and then get ready for Marshall. I think that's the part that's going to be frustrating because everything that the coaches said from their cliche playbook came true. But now they have a different curveball thrown at them, which I bet they find annoying. In the moment, it probably doesn't mean anything in the long-term outlook for Ohio State's season, but they're probably like, come on, man, why do we have to do this?
I go back to 2022, and I've talked about the change that happened in that Ohio State team after the Michigan State game, and then they had an off week, and then they played Iowa at home, and it seemed like they just really got disheveled as a group, and they still won the Iowa game big, but it was ugly, and it just felt like after that off week, they never really hit their stride again. So I do think that that's something Ryan Day and the staff are probably intimately aware of, but what can you do? We got to move past it. We got to find real questions to ask. Like, hey, does Arvell Reese have to be on the field more than almost any other linebacker at this point, or are we not?
He almost was. He almost was last week.
It's hard to say he doesn't deserve it.
Played way more than CJ Hicks. No, I'm with you. I think he deserves it too. Like we're gonna talk to Jim Knowles on Tuesday, and I guess he's not making the linebacker personnel decisions anymore, right? But James Laurinaitis is. But I am fully on the Arvell Reese needs to play more train. You catch me in the right moment, you might be able to convince me he's actually their best linebacker. And I know that Cody Simon is, but sometimes you watch Arvell make a play, you're like, boy, that should be on the field all the time. And I don't know if Ohio State feels the same way. Sonny is very good as well. Like I know they have an embarrassment of riches almost at that position, but they got to figure out a way, I think, to make Arvell a more involved piece of this defense. And I don't know that I was anticipating that 2 weeks ago.
No, and but the other side of that is, what does it mean for CJ Hicks? And people are always going to ask that question. There was a back-to-back play situation on Saturday where third quarter, CJ Hicks is in the game. We got Western Michigan's backup quarterback runs a little QB power read option or whatever, and CJ tries to blow him up, and the guy bounces off of him and drags CJ forward for 5 yards. And the very next play, they run the running back, and Arvell Reese hits him in the backfield, and he just drops like a stone. And you're like, oh, that's the difference. Okay. So you see it very quickly. And so it's hard to deny it when everyone's watching it happen live.
I do think that it is somewhat unfortunate that the CJ Hicks conversation has now become a direct comparison with Arvell Reese. Like, that's the nature of the beast. As a lot of people have said, coaching Ohio State, that's life in the big city. That's the way it works. It used to be CJ Hicks and Sonny Styles. Now it's become CJ Hicks and Arvell Reese. And I think that it continues to put a different conversation in perspective for me, which is there has to be a way to use CJ Hicks and elevate the entirety of the defense. And it's the same one that we've talked about throughout the offseason. If Arvell Reese, through these first 2 weeks, I think that the three of us would have to agree, and probably most people watching this do as well, that Arvell Reese is playing at a higher level at linebacker than CJ Hicks, then he's going to have to get those reps. But that doesn't mean to me that CJ Hicks should be getting no work for Ohio State. And I know that that is a complicated picture because you have Caden Curry playing at a high level. You have Mitchell Melton coming on. You have Kenyatta Jackson. The defensive line is overflowing with talent. And I can understand why Larry Johnson and the Rushman wouldn't want to give up those reps and hand it over to CJ Hicks. But like, still, when he's blitzing, he's pretty darn good, and there's an effectiveness that can help the defense as a whole. But now I think these first 2 weeks have probably put it in sharper perspective what we thought might happen, which is that CJ Hicks is not going to have a full-time role at linebacker, and I don't know how you can really expect that to happen barring injury for this group the way that the others are playing.
Yeah, he played 12 snaps, right? Linebacker? Yeah. So I guess that is probably a more pressing question than whatever you could ask about Arvell Reese. Obviously, they go hand in hand, but present Jim Knowles with the fact that CJ Hicks only played 12 snaps, and then so like now what? Like where do you go from here, kind of thing? But then I guess that just takes us back to the conversation we've had a million times, which is why does Larry Johnson get to decide who plays on the line of scrimmage, and only Larry Johnson, kind of thing.
There was actually a moment on Saturday night, and this is just the things you see. I don't know if it was on the TV copy or not because I haven't rewatched it, but second quarter of the game, might have even been the first quarter, there was a moment where Western Michigan was getting situated at the line of scrimmage, and Ryan Day was like yelling at Larry Johnson, like pointing, directing, and then like it almost looked begrudging that Caden Curry came running onto the field, and then it was someone else had to come off. And I wanted to try to get a sense of what Ryan Day's influence is right now on the defense, because it really looked like he was demanding a player change at that moment. And I don't know why, because it was like a 3rd and 3 or something. And it was a weird moment, but these are things I've just noticed when I'm on the field, and I'm like, oh, I don't think I've ever seen that before.
I didn't catch that on TV, but no, that is, for as much as we talk about Jim Knowles and Larry Johnson, the question probably actually needs to start with Ryan Day, right? So it's not a bad thing to ask him. Yeah.
Well, especially if you are empowering the head coach of the defense or the head coach of the offense now, if that's what I actually have never heard him call Chip Kelly that. But we know that that's the case for Jim Knowles.
Dangerous territory. That's dangerous territory.
Yeah. I don't think I'll go that far. But I think, Berm, that's a fair question. And I think there have been other examples in the first 2 weeks where we're seeing Ryan Day manage the game differently, manage the officials differently, being involved in special teams. And if that's going to then be part of the rotation where he is always deferred, just like Urban Meyer did before, like the position coaches are going to make these decisions, and that's the way it goes. Well, ultimately he's responsible, right? The buck needs to stop somewhere, and I think on his desk is the right place for that to happen.
Yeah, and I don't know the right way to ask that question. I think maybe that's it. Like, hey, with all of this new free time on your hands, are you getting?
Don't phrase it that way. I don't think that's how we use it.
Are you getting?
Don't phrase it the way people have been phrasing questions in the last 2 weeks, where like he was referred to as like a real head coach last week. And
you watching more Netflix during the season? What are you streaming right now, bud?
Now that you're a real head coach, what do you do? Yeah. I'll come up. I think we can come up with some way to craft that, but it does seem like he's just so much more involved. And I wonder how much that extends to the defensive personnel stuff, because I'd never seen him do what he did on Saturday, being that demonstrative towards an assistant to say, get that guy in the game. That was weird. Not weird in a bad way, but just weird, like, weird,
just notable.
Yeah.
Notable. Yeah.
Yeah. What else do you want to know, Bill?
I was double checking the box scores from the last 2 weeks just to make sure this was right. And I would ask this, I guess, understanding that 1, Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson are very good, and 2, it's hard to play 3 running backs. James Peoples looks really good. And he's not touched the ball until the 3rd quarter of either game, and I'm wondering if there's more for him in this offense. Again, like Quinshon and Travion should get the majority of the carries, although I think Peoples and Travion, they all basically have the same number of carries. It's like 21, 18, and 18. So it's been pretty even, but it's been Peoples in the second half of both these games mostly. He just looks like someone who's ready to play and ready to do more and ready to help this offense in the moments that matter. And maybe they won't encounter any against Marshall. But I'm wondering if there's an actual path for him to push to get like high leverage reps, or if the answer to that is just no, because they're already set with their top 2. And that's probably a fine answer, because again, they're both very good. But I've been pretty excited about what I've seen from James Peoples in these first 2 games. I know people were really high on him coming out of camp, but that doesn't always guarantee that it's going to look good when a freshman gets on the field for the first time. And he runs angry. He's very decisive. He runs through tackles. He's got great vision, and he just really seems like the total package. So feel very good about the future of the position because of that. But I'm also left wondering if the future maybe can't come a little sooner and he can get involved with a couple carries earlier in games to be a complement to Quinshon and Travion.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see him have what he looks like behind the first team offensive line, I guess, is what it comes down to. Yeah. And if he's out rushing the NCAA 2025 cover guy through 2 games. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
That's because the NCAA cover guy's bad.
Yeah, you might not have heard this.
NCAA 2025 cover guy.
He's never been good, by the way.
He's the most overrated running back in the country.
You don't have to stop short at running back. You can say player.
Okay, he's the most overrated player in the country. You're absolutely right, partner. This is going to sound like I'm pushing back against the idea, Bill, and I don't mean it this way, but it's like hard enough to make sure that you're getting workload for both Quinshon and Travian. I think Ohio State's done a pretty good job of that, but bigger games are coming.
Yeah,
I'm like kind of. I'm really excited by what James Peoples is doing. Like I thought that his touchdown run in the opener was like the most electrifying 4-yard carry you could ever have, and he looked really good again on Saturday night. It is not a knock on his ability or potential or any of that stuff. I'm just like, do you want to add in another variable into the equation? Like, because Quinshon and Travian, I think keeping them healthy, that's got to be the goal. And if that's the case, like maybe you could just play James Peoples for an entire game. But I wonder, like, if it was Oregon on Saturday and trying to find a way for all 3 of those guys, plus carries for Will Howard, and plus eventually, I think, some rushing attack from Emeka Ibuka or Brandon Ennis. Like now we're talking about maybe too much to handle. So I don't mean that James Peoples can't do it, because I think he very much could. But I start to get a little wary about how many people you want to involve in the rushing attack. And because I do think there's an element where Quinshon and Travian both, maybe one more than the other. I think Quinshon like thrives on a heavy workload and builds and wears down defenders, and like taking that out and risking that. I don't know Carlos Loughlin's philosophy on that. It's still pretty early, but that to me seems like a headache that I wouldn't want to add.
Yeah, it could be, and I'm definitely, just in case anyone can feel like I'm 100% not approaching that conversation from the same place of your running backs look ineffective. Why doesn't Dallin Hayden play more? Like, it's not nearly the same thing. It's just like, this guy's good too. Can all 3 of them play? But I get it. I get that all 3 of them can't play.
Hey, they had 4 tight ends on the field at the same time.
Now you're talking. So see, now we're getting somewhere. 3 running backs.
I'll watch it.
Yeah.
We know this press conference with Ryan Day, for those who are going to be tuned in on the live stream, is going to be an abbreviated press conference because it's improvement week, which means we get less access because the Buckeyes are improving, which makes perfect sense when you think about it. So I don't know that we're all going to get to ask questions, because that's the way it works sometimes. They go by outlet and there's 3 of us and it's an abbreviated thing, and it might be cut down. But I want to know about what I asked about on Friday when we did Bold Peas, when I was talking about the tight end production with a big time recruit in the building, because it did seem somewhat intentional by Ohio State on Saturday to throw the ball to the tight end, because they had Max Sutter from Illinois in attendance, who told me on Monday, like, yeah, I really liked what I saw because they used the tight end a lot and they scored touchdowns. I'm like, oh, I want to know like the philosophy that goes into.
That's why they threw to Bennett Christian.
Probably not. I mean, he was just wide open, but I mean, he was not the only time they threw to the tight end. It seemed to be a fairly, regular thing on Saturday night. So I just want to know, from a philosophy standpoint, how much conversation there actually is when one of the assistants says, "Hey, I've got a dude coming in. Can we figure out a way to spice this up a little bit for my position group?" Because it felt intentional, and I want to know if that's true.
I think you nailed it. I think they absolutely do. When they can, when the opponent allows them to, I think they absolutely do what you said. They went from 1 tight end target to 7 tight end targets and put the entire room on the field for their first touchdown run of the game.
Have you ever seen Ohio State run 4 tight ends at one time? I don't think
I've seen anybody ever do it before.
Dude, I saw the first 2 guys run out, and then I was like taking pictures of the line, and then I went to the left side of the line. There were 2 more of them. I'm like, what the hell? Why are all these guys out there? I'm surprised Patrick Gerd didn't get the carry.
I couldn't get a good replay in the press box, but I'm like, well, that was heavy personnel. I was like, I wonder who was the Bison, who was the 6th offensive lineman out there, and I couldn't get like a clear picture, and I kept trying to add them up, and I'm like, what? Well, there weren't 6 offensive linemen. There were 4 tight ends out there. I have never had to count that before. But here's what I'll do for Improvement Week, Berm. I will make sure that Jerry Emig knows if our questions per outlet are limited, please call on Berm before me.
No.
I want to be a good team.
I don't want that to be the case. I want it to be organic and natural. That's the way I like it. I figure as long as everybody sticks to the one question they're going to be asked to ask, then I think we'll be fine.
Well, you already know that's not going to happen, bud. So try again. 0% chance that will occur.
Waving the white flag.
Yeah. I'm glad you had that nearby. Is there anything else that we need to know about on a Tuesday? Like, it is improvement week, so there's not a lot of pressing urgency. And Ohio State has won by a combined score of 108-6 in the first two games.
No turnovers last week, though.
Yeah, no, I guess maybe the one other thing for me is related to Donovan Jackson and when they think they need to have him back and playing and practicing full time to build the kind of rapport I guess they need to build before they start playing some real defenses. And maybe that's not until they play Iowa. I don't think Michigan State will provide a tremendous defensive test, but Iowa definitely will. Right, we know that, and Oregon will. So, does Donovan need to play against Marshall? I guess in their mind, and does he need to start taking like full practice reps this week to get to that point? So, I'm wondering about that timeline.
See, I have an offensive line question, but it's not going to get answered this week, so I don't want to really ask too much about it. But I thought it was interesting that when they had the twos out there, they put Carson Hinsman back at center and Luke Montgomery at guard. When the entire offseason has been talked about Carson Hinsman working at guard, and then there was a lot of discussion about Luke Montgomery at center, then we see them go out there, and they kept Austin Sareveld in the game to put Hinsman at center instead. It just didn't make sense to me, and I guess maybe it's not meant to. Maybe we aren't supposed to know the answer, but I think for the players' sake, it would probably be good to have an idea of where you're going to be and where if where you're practicing is the same as where you're playing, because all these guys are trying to improve and get better for the future. But it just that was perplexing to me. I mean, they played fine. They played pretty well for a backup group that hadn't played much. But it was just perplexing. I'm often perplexed.
I bet that doesn't come up on
exactly
on Tuesday.
But it's coming up here now.
It is. And it's not saying it's a bad question. It is one for the future. It certainly seems like the depth of the current group, though, is getting better once you have Donovan Jackson back. Austin Sareveld playing well for 2 weeks in a row. So I feel like offensive line questions, they're the favorite of the podcast daily, and we should get more of them. So if Bill wants to ask multiple questions on Tuesday, he should feel free, and we can get to the bottom of all of that.
When Jerry calls on me, I'm going to say, yeah, Berm's got a question, and then just throw it back to him.
And it's all about the offensive line.
Yeah.
And
no,
we'll get
it's not. This needs to be organic, folks. Okay.
All right.
We don't need to goose it. We don't need to goose it.
Don't need to goose it. Fine. We won't goose it, but we will be asking questions in the Woody Hayes Athletics Center. It is the only time in the Woody this week. There is no Woody Wednesday. The players getting Wednesday off from us, as well as the rest of those assistants. So it'll just be Jim Knowles and Ryan Day this week. But that doesn't mean we're going to slow down the content. We're not. We're going to keep rolling along with the podcast daily all week long. Got some stuff planned in the later in the week to get your questions for home breaks, along with Card Collector 2. Bill and I will be down in Grove City for that. You're going to want to stay tuned. We're going to have Buckeye Q. We're going to be at Roosters later today, Tuesday. Another Tuesday edition of the live show will be at Henderson after the press conference and after Snap Judgment. So normal stuff still coming your way. Stay with us for all of that on the podcast. Thanks for starting the day on the daily with Bill Landis, Jeremy Birmingham, and me, Austin Ward. We'll talk to you later.